Greetings, scholars! How do the Fast and Furious movies stand up to physics? Actually, not as bad as you, or I, might think. So let's start out by assuming that all the stunts in Fast and Furious 6 actually happened. And I'll use the power of science to show some pretty incredible things. Today we're just going to be looking at the scene where Dom jumps out of his car and saves Letty. To get to the part that I'm talking about, skip to 1 minute 25 seconds in this clip. Okay, so let's talk about momentum. Newton's first law states that an object will not change speeds unless acted upon by an outside force. A popular result of this idea is the conservation of momentum. It states that a system will not change its momentum in any direction unless acted upon by external forces. In this example, our system is Dom and Letty. Since they're both in the air, the only force acting on them is gravity, because we're going to ignore air friction. We're also going to reduce this to a one-dimensional problem, because in reality, momentum needs to be matched in all three directions. But let's just look at the horizontal direction. We are also going to assume that Dom and Letty are point masses, since if we didn't, the math would take way too long. So here's our equation for momentum. Note that this is an inelastic collision, because the two stick together at the end. First, we'll do some rough estimates of the masses for both Letty and Dom. That's easy. The second thing we can do is calculate the final velocity. They're both bound by the fact that the velocity needs to carry them safely into a windshield of a car. By watching this clip many times, I estimated this distance to be about 7 VINs. It's hard to tell how much time it takes because it's in slow motion, but I clocked it at 1 second. So we can now fill in our final velocity, and all that's left is to find the initial velocities of the tank and Daytona. According to internet experts from a World of Tanks forum, the tank is definitely fake, but let's give the bad guys the benefit of the doubt and say it's going 60 miles per hour. Many modern tanks are limited by this speed, and it also makes sense based on how fast the traffic was moving relative to the tank. So now we can solve the momentum equation for Dom's initial speed, and we get 76 miles per hour. Whoa, that's actually very plausible. But hold on a second. We assumed that all the speed was converted directly into the horizontal direction, but if you look at the clip, that's definitely not the case. It looks like Dom's angle is about 45 degrees, and we're going to estimate the tank as half that, 22.5 degrees. So our calculation gets a little bit more confusing because we need to resolve our velocity into two different components. Here's a real quick example of how we do it. Now all we do is thank Pythagoras and SearchLite for not going through the entire calculation, and now we get that he's moving 85 miles per hour. 85 miles per hour seems like a pretty easy feat, considering a 1969 Dodge Charger Daytona has a max speed of 200 miles per hour. But consider the acceleration. In the clip, Dom stays relatively even with the tank before turning into the jump, so he couldn't have been going much faster than 60. Let's call it 65. Dom's turn took about 2 seconds, so his car is accelerating from 65 to 85 miles per hour in 2 seconds while doing a turn. So he's made some serious modifications to that car. According to an online automobile catalog, the Daytona usually takes about 4.5 seconds to accelerate from 65 to 85, and it would be even more difficult to accelerate with so much friction in the turn. So it looks like in my quest to show how ridiculous this stunt is, I actually ended up finding how it could actually be pretty plausible. It is still ridiculous the amount of skill involved to make this happen, but for anyone who's seen a Dude Perfect video, this doesn't seem that far off. Good on you, Fast and Furious. I probably just became the only person who takes you seriously in the entire world. And thanks to all of you who watched. Don't be afraid to leave a comment if you disagree with my analysis, or if there's anything about my process you'd like me to explain more. Last but not least, don't forget to like and subscribe.